Okay, so I'm Liisa McCloy Kelley from Penguin Random House, and I am another one of those people who works for a very big publishing company. I'll apologize now, but I will say that we are trying to do some really, really cool stuff. And some of that is thinking about books in more than two dimensions and helping the rest of our organization to do that. So what I do at Penguin Random House, is that I lead a team of developers who work on our ebook specifications and who work on every book that is beyond one color straight text. We made 1,450 ebooks last year. We were trying it for a variety of genres across all kinds of imprints and publications, and this is very much a stonecutter's job. We are chiseling away at what might make the future. I also work to influence our publishers, other publishers, editors, customers, standards, competitors, always out there trying to figure out how we're going to improve these ebook experiences. And it's a lot like trying to architect a cathedral. And at the highest level, I'm trying to change what reading will be for generations to come. And that's what gets me out of bed in the morning and drags me in when this is an incredibly frustrating time to actually be trying to put product in the market. So why publishing is different than other industries? Well, it comes down to nostalgia and experience. And I felt a little, I was missing a Gutenberg Bible slide earlier, and I felt like everybody's had a Gutenberg Bible or some kind of illustrated manuscript. So this is mine. This is a copy of the Gutenberg Bible from the Beinecke Library at Yale, where I teach in the summer at the Yale Publishing course. But one of the biggest things that we hear from people about why they resist digital reading experiences is they love the way that books smell. And we've not been able to reproduce that digitally. We've not really tried very hard. Not sure if they realize that thing that they love so much is probably horse glue or some kind of chemical. But there is a really great reading experience that comes from print that we are always very cognizant of as we start to think about how to change that for digital experiences, because we've built up an entire industry and a culture around this feeling of reading something, but also about writing meant to be put into two dimensions. One of the things that was brought up this morning that I felt like I just had to throw something in here to show you why this is not easy, this whole book web thing, is that the web is not static. And books are not static either, but people are very forgiving of mistakes that are in books about references that may be out of date. They are less forgiving when those references are out of date in digital products. And certainly the retailers are very less forgiving about references that are out of date. So in this example, we have a reference to a website, the BatuqueFoundation.org, that we heard from a retailer. We're very sorry, your book has a problem. We need to have you fix this link. This reference is to a foundation the author put into the book. This author has gotten himself embattled in a political thing. The foundation is in flux. He lost his website. We don't want to take that out of the source material just because the website no longer exists. We don't want a bad experience just because the website no longer exists. So we're now stuck with this editorial conundrum of how do you explain extant references? And what do you do about them? Because are we going to continue to keep this on our list of problems to solve as we continue talking to this person? Our relationship with this author may not be an active one at this point. Are we going to keep calling him every year like, hey, did you get your foundation back on the ground? Do you want to take that reference out of your book? This gets put into, typically in print, a drawer of corrections that maybe if we reprint a book comes back. But digitally, we have tons and tons of these issues that come up every day. So I want to start with a book that is relatively simple, but shows a little bit of how writing is changing. And we're seeing a lot where fiction writing is changing these days, and the way that we display it, both print and digitally, is starting to adapt. This book is about two girls in the hospital. the story is told so that there are two voices happening and that there is a curtain between these two girls. And sometimes that curtain is open and sometimes that curtain is closed. And it was very, very important to the author that we were able to maintain that font treatment with the two voices, to maintain that curtain, to maintain the look and feel of that through the ebook. And fortunately, with technology today, we were able to do that pretty well. And we've been able to make it so that even on a very small screen, we were able to adjust so that we're using a media query to look at the size of your screen to figure out, okay, we should bring this back into one column or we should leave it as two columns. We'll do the best display that we can. In this example, this is a cookbook. This is the print edition of this cookbook. And this is a really classic example of how we write content for print. This author has a sweetened milk recipe. This recipe can be adapted for any one of these nuts, or seeds, or grains. And we had to actually add that into the ebook because it didn't say it anywhere in the print book that they were nuts, seeds, and grains. But when she saw the ebook treatment, she was like, oh my gosh, we have to add. And that's what happens a lot as we start to think about digital. On one hand, this chart is very, very handy. You can look at it and pretty quickly think about how much time you have, how much of any particular one of those items you have. You can think about which nut milk you're going to make. But all of this text is very long. And it's long because they had to write in all of the sort of variations for you to be able to do this with all of these different types of things. So when we adapted this for a digital experience, we lead you into the story of why you should make your own nut milks. And then we show you the recipe, which is a little bit simpler. We actually do show you that chart because we realize the chart in and of itself is a good decision point. But we also made an interactive version of the recipe where you can select the nut milk or seed that you want to work with and populate that. And then we realized as we were working on this, well, there actually was 4 lines of copy that talked about picking a sweetener. And we were able to make that a variable. And it shortened up what is in the rest of the recipe because we didn't need all the rest of that text. But what it means is that this text is significantly different in the digital product or this edition of the digital product than it is in the physical product. That said, it's a really nice feature. It's not something that needed a whole app, but it needed a little bit of app-like functionality to give that page of this book more character. Here's an example of a kid's picture book. This is an oversized picture book in print. Mark Brown is a well-known illustrator. He did this travel title. It was, a love note to the city that he lives in. And at the end of the book, he gave us this lovely list of resources, of places that he mentioned in the book, things that you might want to do. When we adapted this for digital, we wanted to add in more travel resources. We worked with him so that we could make a great digital experience where, and the sound is not great. There are sounds, the text enlarges. We have travel photographs where he wrote more. Yeah, good. He wrote more copy to go with these travel photographs so you could really get a sense of his illustrations and everything else. And then we worked with our travel group to provide some maps that allow us to filter through not just all of those things that fit into the 2 pages that he had in print, but he was able to expand that list and extract more information there that could be added to the book. And that's a big thing that we're finding as we work on more digital products, is that we cut a huge amount of content to fit it into pages and signatures. There's tons of stuff that people write that gets left on the cutting boards, right? And when we go back and we work on digital products, one of the big things that we've been working with our editors and designers to do is to keep track of all that material. Because if you had a cookbook and you let go of a chart maybe, or you had some spread or an extra recipe, we can always put those back into our digital products. We aren't limited by the space in the same way. This is a great example of what was a perfect sort of digital reading project because it's a book about reading, right? And we wanted to make it a digital version of this book, a book about reading digitally. And it was a great way to showcase what we're capable of doing with the technology these days. In print, this book is all black and white. It was written and developed by a designer who very carefully handcrafted every one of these print pages himself. He worked very hard to make sure that he had this story that led from page to page, that read in a beautiful way. But there are all of these things that he's talking about, the way that you visualize as you read, that are maybe not perfectly adapted for reading on paper. So for the digital experience, we were able to put in some animation. We were able to work with him to add back in color. And we were able to bring that story more to life. And it wasn't necessary on every single page, but it was nice to sort of bring in these pops of things that he had designed in a very flat way and make them more three-dimensional. And working on trying to figure out how to do that, where to do it, what to do, was really a collaboration, because what we're finding is that we have a lot of people in our organization who are really excited about this technology. They're excited about what they can do. They just don't know where the boundaries are. And we don't, any of us know where all of the boundaries are. We're working in a box that does not have defined sides, and every once in a while you poke through one side or you find that it's a little closer than you thought, but sometimes you end up with a lovely red chair. And that really tells the story of you imagining that chair. So this is a project that has taken a lot of time and energy over the last year. And it's been an effort of love and a really interesting challenge. In print, the annotated Pride and Prejudice is a beautiful print experience. This is a vintage title. It was designed originally to have a very vintage look and feel. But on the left page, there is the text of the book. And on the right page, there are the annotations. And the annotations for this book had to be edited down because you could only fit as many annotations for a given page as would work on a facing page. The way that it was designed was you could just read all the left pages, or you could read left and right and read the notes as you went along. It's a little bit of a distracting experience, and they were aware of that when they made the book. And they were aware of the fact that they left a lot of content out in order to get this to print. So when the possibility came back to do this as an educational title in a digital way, we really worked on trying to find an aesthetic that would allow you to just read the book, to read the book and listen to the book, to read the book and explore the book. And this is what we came up with. So we've put color images in. There are hundreds of images. If you get to the annotations, you can see the context, you can see images. There's way more information in these notes than there was originally. We've been able to go back and put in a lot of information. We've been able to put cross-references in between the notes that are all linkable. An educator has worked with us to develop study questions that can be pulled out. And there are all these interactive bits that you can go through to take quizzes, to look at animated maps, to look at now and then pictures of all of the locations. When you get these questions right or wrong, it will tell you. I purposely got 3 wrong first. So this is a book that we feel like is going to be a really useful new kind of experience for an educational market, or just somebody who wants to read and get all of this extra material. Here's an example of something that is just really simple. And this is where we're finally getting to this point with all those titles that have been digitized. There are lots of things out there that we digitized first that was easy. And then there were lots of things out there that we digitized next that was like, we have the rights, we can do this is great. And then there was this whole pile full of books, many, many piles full of books, that were deemed as not possible. This book is a great example of that. It's in print, it's a board book. It's a board book that has a little game in the middle of it. That game allows you to turn the pages with a hole in the middle of it, and try to tell the time. Now we're able to do that digitally and let you actually have that same experience of playing with it. It's not really an app. It's only 16 pages, the entire book, so we don't want to try to sell it as here's a great experience. It's just a book, and you want it on the shelf with the rest of your P.D. Eastman books. So we've been able to make an interactive edition to do that. We also were actually really proud of the fact that we remembered we had audio from an audio version of another Fred and Ted interactive book. And we remembered that said something like,
Good night,
Ted, good night, Fred.
Good night, Fred, says Ted.
What we didn't have was the says Fred, says Ted. And we were actually able to use an audio engineer who was able to find and piece together and make that audio for us so that we were able to reuse the content. This is a great example of where something didn't exist in print and we realized that it could. So for the Ken Burns, Jeff Ward, The Roosevelts book, we have this beautiful illustrated book. We made this beautiful illustrated ebook, but we realized as we were working on it that this is a timeline and a story of 3 characters, that there are all these places you're hearing about these things that are happening in history and between each of them, and because the book itself is organized as one character story, another character story, another character story, you don't see the way that those things interact. And we were able to work with the editor and author to find a way to give you a really visual representation of how these timelines work together. And we're finding that that's a really useful tool in a lot of nonfiction books because it gives context that wasn't there originally. If we had done something like this in print, we would have looked at it as a list. And it would have been a very dull list of date, action. And that was actually where we started, is we started pulling together this content. And then we worked on, okay, well, this is 3-dimensional. We could pop up a picture. We could pop up more text. We could make sure, and it was really fun to see these people who are so used to things being stuck on page start to be like, what do you mean it all slides to the side? What's really hard in that is that they want to put instructions everywhere that say it slides to the side. And we realized that they need to understand most people who have devices realize you can touch them. So of course the problem that we all face with this is where can you sell this stuff? And we're in a very chicken and egg space. We don't have a lot of places to sell this stuff. But if we don't make it, they don't make the reading systems to actually sell it. So we're making a lot of interactive books. We're trying a lot of things out, and we're hoping that these become more prevalent. So thank you very much. I hope you go read a cool book.